Hey, we're live. How's everybody doing? My name is Miguel.
And I'm Tran.
She hates that I do this part,
I
but
hate it. I feel really awkward.
I think it's good. Give me 1 second. So, welcome back to episode. What is it, 7? So, wow, we've been doing this for a bit already. I hope you guys liked our new intro. We think it's pretty awesome, and yeah, really happy with it. So, this week has been a lot of new stuff going on, and we're going to show you some of the stuff right now. I think the first thing we wanted to go over really quickly is, as we showed you guys last week, we actually got the motion capture suit and the gloves while we were doing the live stream last week. And a few days later, we actually got the mocap helmet. So we just wanted to show like a real quick unboxing of this stuff in case anybody's interested in any of this stuff. So the helmet, which is the first thing I'm opening, is by this company called Radical Variants. And we, for a while, we wanted to just do. There's a lot of like make your own helmet type of tutorials online on making these kind of mocap helmets, but we kind of wanted to just get a professional one because the price difference it is quite significant, but it wasn't that much. And this company, they had won the Academy Award for their mocap work on Avatar. So this is the helmet that we got. You can see it comes with like some extra padding, so you could swap it out. It's all like Velcro rigged onto the helmet. So we got a few extras just in case, since we only have one suit, so you don't want to have any sweat as you pass it from person to person. There's a counterbalance because this is using a camera as your phone as your camera. So you want to have a counterbalance, and it's all made out of aluminum alloys. It's ridiculously lightweight, which is one of the things that I really liked about it. A lot of the ones we saw before or online tended to be like skateboarding helmets, and this one just was made for this. So you could see that's your bar, so you could figure out the distance, and there's like a ruler on there, so you could figure out the distance based on the actors or your camera's field of view. That's your back strap, so that's not a chin strap. That's just the cameras going on in the front there. Uh, really beautiful. I wish you guys could hold this thing so you can see. Some parts definitely feel really fragile, even though it's aluminum. It definitely feels like this is not something you want to like lend to other people for the weekend because it'll never come back the same. Um, this is the xsens suit, and then the gloves. This was the one we were the most excited about. So we looked at a bunch of different motion capture systems, and this one seemed to be the one that we thought was the best price and quality. So we had seen like some of the Rococo stuff, which we were interested in. It was cheaper, but the quality of the stuff we were seeing just wasn't up to par with what we wanted. So the XN seemed to be the best one. So this is a company from the Netherlands, shipped ridiculously fast. You could see it comes in a really nice packaging. Let's try to see. So this is the glove. So this is a different company called Manus, but they made these to work with xsens. So it's like a partnership. Um, so pretty cool. Really nice packaging on all of this stuff. And then the xsens itself, it comes in this really beautiful. Uh, it's like a textured felt kind of. So the downfall is it could pick up a lint if you put it on the rug like we're doing here. But it's really beautiful, very sturdy. You can see it's not cheaply made. All the zippers are very custom, but you can see like the lint and stuff. It just picks up any little fibers because of the texture of it. Carrying handle, very nice, on brand and whatnot. So let's like open it up and I'll just show you guys what's inside. And I edited this really quickly, so forgive me if some parts go a little bit slow. But you can see, I noticed that there wasn't a lot of breakdowns or unboxings of mocap suits, so I thought that this would be something interesting to show everybody. So you could see it comes well packaged. You have this quick little quick start. And then you can see this one I think has 17 or 18 sensors. And if you look at any one of the sensors, it has a name on it, which is kind of hard to see there. So you can see hand, foot, left leg, right foot, I guess F arm, forearm, shoulders. So pretty nice. You can just put them back in there, and they have a Velcro mount to them in the back, which I'll show you in a minute. Here's your dongle for the software. You know, all of this stuff really well made. And you can see, you could probably just stick this inside of a Pelican case, which is pretty nice. This is your charging stations. It comes with two of them because, actually it comes with three of them because of the amount of sensors that are there. It comes with a little toy, which is kind of funny because I'm a toy guy, so it's kind of funny. Can't get away from toys. So you can see a wireless antenna there. It's pretty cool. And then we have the third docking station. These are all really nice and they're branded and whatever. So they're not just like, well, obviously they're not like off the counter stuff because, you know, this is a mocap suit, but they're really well made. It's these are not so heavy, but pretty nice. So if you open up the other side here, you can see they come with 3 different shirts. And these shirts are not just for you to look goofy in. They actually have a purpose. The back of them, or in certain parts of the shirt, there's Velcro on it in specific places for you to mount the mocap sensors. So you can see in the back there, you have the Velcro for your shoulder, and you can see that's the Velcro that connects to the actual Velcro. You have a strap. This is for the case. You have a measuring tape because you have to take measurements of all the sensors so it knows how to calibrate it to the actor. Very nice measuring tape because it's not just like an off the shelf Home Depot one. It's got like these little thongs to it so that you don't have to be touching the talent. So this is your headband, and this is where one of the sensors is getting connected to, and that just slips inside of there. You have you don't have to buy the gloves with this. So if you don't buy the gloves, you could just put these on, and the sensor just gets stuck on the palm. So you would still have the rotation of the hands, but not the individual fingers. And the fingers for us is something we really wanted. So you can see it comes with 2 sets, which is cool. And I believe lastly is just the individual straps for you to attach this to the whole body. Okay, and all of these are Velcro. So we opted to go for this one over the suit one because, well, for budgetary reasons primarily, but also because the suit would only fit one body shape, whereas this one being Velcro straps, the quality seemed to be the same, but you could just apply it on anybody. So a 12-foot giant or a little person. So these are the gloves here. Again, very beautiful packaging on all of this stuff. And what's cool is if you don't want to keep the box, you could just pull out this pre-cut foam and put it into a Pelican case, which is probably what we'll end up doing. So you can see there's your gloves. These things are ridiculously lightweight. You wouldn't think that there's sensors in this thing. So It's pretty crazy. And you can see you have your charging input there, your on off button. On the sides, there's a battery input. You don't feel anything in the fingers. There's no weird stuff going on in there. So you don't feel wires. You don't feel any kind of hard sensor or anything. It just feels like a regular glove. Okay. So that comes with your charging wires. So just regular USB, and they just plug right onto the top of the palm. These are the batteries, and they just slip in. Pretty easy to put in. I had a hard time pulling them out, which is a little bit concerning because how expensive these gloves are and how fragile they are. You had to give it quite a pull, which was like I said, is a little unnerving. So this is your wireless receiver. So this goes into your computer USB. Your other battery. And underneath you have a bunch of power connectors from pretty much the entire world. So all kinds of different voltage adapters. So pretty cool. I think the other thing is just the actual plug for you to connect a USB to, but that's it. These, I believe, go on the top so that you could connect the xsens sensor to the gloves, because the actual sensors, the orange ones from the xsens suit, have to be slipped into this. Okay. But that's it. It's pretty cool. We're super excited to get this thing operational. We didn't have enough time to really work on it this week, but we thought it'd be pretty cool. So you can see how it just slips right in there for charging. And if you turn it on, it has this really cool light. I think Tran is seeing this for the first time herself. Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
So you can see it just slips in there. And nothing says expensive like a blinking light. So there you go. You can see very, very nicely made. Very cool. So we're not being sponsored by these guys at all. So for all you know, next week we're saying how horrible they are or how amazing they are. They didn't give us this. We didn't get a discount on this. We didn't. We're not sponsored by them by any means. So what you'll hear from now on, since we wanted to show the unboxing because this is going to be the pipeline that we're using for all the animations. So we thought it'd be cool to show you guys from literally day one. This is how we're doing. This is how we're doing the motion capture, and there you can see like a little card showing what everything is. So pretty cool. And that's it. That's everything together. Very excited to get that going. So yeah, that's that. Trans, any thoughts on that?
No, it's cool.
It's
I'm
pretty cool,
excited.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
So Tran is gonna take it from here. And
I'm
she's
starting
gonna
first.
Yeah, you're gonna start first, and then I'll come back in later.
All right. I didn't know I was starting first. Give me 1 second.
Do you want me to go first?
Nah, I might as well start.
Can you guys hear us okay?
Well, we'll just have to assume they can hear us.
Okay, cool.
So, okay.
Okay, great.
Okay, so let me share my screen. There we are. Okay, so what I've been doing is I've been working on a couple of things that I'm not really ready to show yet, but I'm somewhat ready to show this. I've been working on the extras, right? So background characters, because well, you have to have more than just like two people in our story. This is probably the first look I'm showing of the father. So this would be the father character. And then I started setting up some of the materials. And then I realized, right, like as I was working on these characters here, I was making screenshots and then just putting them in pure ref. And then Miguel came by my desk and he's like, yeah, they're cool. But we need like way more paint variations of these characters, right? Like they're all like changing the color here and there and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, I can't just go from Substance Painter and make like 100 variations like that. It's going to take way too long. So I was doing all this work in here. And then I realized, okay, so I need to kind of come up with some kind of pipeline, very manual pipeline, but some kind of pipeline in order to alter and change the paint and the paint patterns and then the clothing colors and stuff like that. That way, when we have these characters at a distance and they're really tiny, you won't really notice what they look like as far as the modeling, but you will see like, okay, there's a large variety. The male character is based on the father's body. So they all have the same topology, but this is his body. And the only thing that we're changing are just the heads, right? I'm trying to keep the eye positions all the same so that we can transfer all the blend shapes of the blinks and they don't have to have unique blinks and stuff like that. So all the eyeballs don't change. And then as far as the female characters, they're all based on Allah, and their eyes positions is still also the same, and their body is exactly the same. And the only thing that's really changing is the head. So basically, trying to simplify it and not going overcomplicated. There is restrictions on that. Like if we had more resources, more time, and money, and just more people, not just Miguel and I, we would have a lot more height variations and shapes in the bodies and stuff like that. But I think this is going to work fine. They're not featured characters. They're meant to be in the back and to walk around, basically act like props so that it doesn't feel like an extremely empty world, right? So
Yeah, even how big they look there is probably too big.
yeah, they're just going to be
Probably gonna be like that, yeah.
walking around. And you can see like all the paint is kind of looks the same. There's some minor variety. But again, I didn't want to be in a position where I have to manually paint like 100 different maps inside of Substance. It would be a lot of textures if each character had like unique complete maps and stuff like that. So it's just coming up with a way to share it. So before that though, I do want to kind of go into how I started building the material for this character. So ultimately at the end, I did end up with pretty simple, and I think simple is good, with simple materials for the main characters. And then the extras are the ones that have actually much more complex materials. So let me just open up something here, or, I'll just start something new. So let's go into here. Let's just dock this. Give me 1 second. I just create a new folder. And then I can delete this later or mess up or something like that, and it won't break everything else. So I'm going to create a new material, and this will be a master demo right here. And let's just double click. And some of the stuff is pretty basic. It'll get a little bit more complicated, but I don't generally like complicated material graphs. I just think it's too complicated. I don't want to juggle all this stuff. I want things to be easy and fast, and for Miguel to pick it up and just be like, okay, this all makes sense, right? So the goal is to keep it simple. More complex is not necessarily better. I'm going to drop in some of the textures. Let's start with the father. Let's see where his textures are. Here he is. And let's just start here. So you can do something really simple. Let's get his normal, his roughness. And that's all I have basically initially for the father. Okay. Give me 1 second. Let me load some other stuff. Just make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. I'm going to preview this as a plane. That way I can see the textures. And you can do something very simple where you just like hook this up. Let's look at this. I wish I could make this a little bit brighter. Let's plug in some normal map here. And this is my roughness, so I can just plug this into here. Okay. And then this could work, right? And that's fine. But what I notice a lot when we're lighting, for example, depending on the lighting, sometimes it looks really reflective, right? So there's really no way for me to adjust or change any of this stuff. I will show, I should probably show the final.
On a shot by shot basis.
Yes.
Yeah.
So here's like my final one. I'm going to do this from scratch, but you can see on this final one here that I have of the father, if I want to come in, ultimately I can change him, right? I can change his brightness level, right? I can tint him. Not that I think he should be purple.
And,
but
and if the paint is that adjusting as well? No.
well, yes, everything's adjusting. Okay. He's really simple. The extra ones
extras
are much more complicated, right? I also decided to go with a specular. So a lot of what I've noticed is when I'm looking at other tutorials or how people set up, they don't initially always have a specular. Just keeping it at 1 is fine. But to me, specular makes a huge difference because, especially with lighting, right? Sometimes the character can look too wet and too reflective. So I actually really want to have this extra control that I can just bring it down. So see, maybe I should zoom in a little bit more so I can see this. You can see this here. And then I ended up adding a controller to just kind of multiply the roughness here. So I can change some of this and then I can balance this. And to me, reflections and roughness maps are really critical to getting something to look nice. I also at the end did set up something where we can actually control the normal, right? So you can see I reversed it or increasing it. Okay, so that's basically the setup here. And I will just come here and do this from scratch. So in order to get some of the stuff that I want, let's actually apply this one here. I want to actually apply this material. In practice, it's not good to do it with a master material because it's slower. What you want to do is you want to create material instance. So now I have a master and an instance. I'm going to take this character and then just drop this instance on top, and we can start seeing it update. I can save this. Let's give it a second. Okay, and now we have this here, and it looks all right, but I don't have any of these controls. So if I double click and I look at my instance, this is default. The other thing is when you're looking at this, I can't really swap out any of my maps or anything like that. So I can't, with the way it's currently set up, I can't take this same material. Whereas these guys right here, they're all using the same master material, and I'm swapping out basically the maps for each character, right? And I can, if I want to use this material ultimately for Ala and Koa, it would be nice if I can actually open up and swap some of that stuff out. So let's just come back here. And the first thing I want to do here is just create a comment box. If I just type C, I'll have this pop up, and I just want to call this albedo so I can start organizing this. Let's just place this here. Let's put one here. This is roughness. If you're a beginner, this is probably interesting to see. And if you're not, maybe you'll be interested in how I break out some of my maps from Substance to organize this. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that I can actually swap out these maps. To do that, I'm going to take this texture sample and right click and convert it to a parameter. I'm going to name this albedo. Now, if I save this and I check my instance right here, you can see now this has popped up, right? And it's called albedo after what I named it. And now I can actually swap it in and out, which is nice. The next thing I want to do is I want to start organizing by groups, right? I'll show what happens if I don't. So I'm going to convert this. Let's call this roughness. And let's also convert this to a parameter. And I'm going to call this normal. Okay, and let's just save it. Once I save it, I should see it update in my instance material over here. And you can see I have all this stuff. Now, eventually, I'm going to have all these other extra controls, and I need to organize this. It does work pretty alphabetical, but sometimes you might have something called, multiply or whatever, and you don't really want all my multiplies for my albedo and normals to show up all over the place. So I want to actually start organizing this. Okay. One way to organize this is if I look at this option here and I scroll down, I have group. Right now there's none, right? In order to create one, you can just type something in. And I'm going to start numbering them. So the first thing I want to see is my albedo. So I'm going to do 01 dash albedo. And then we have priority numbers, right? So if I have multiple nodes, it's going to show up in the order of actually the numbering. So I'm going to start this off at 1. And then let's just set up this group here. Before that, actually, I want to set up metallic. So I don't have metallic maps, but I might decide later on that I do want to input some kind of metallic map for whatever reason. And I want to have that option available, okay? So I can do a couple things. I'm going to create a constant. So metallics are black and white, right? So I just need black and white kind of map like this. I'm going to convert this and I'm going to call this metallic. And I can just put this in here. Okay, and let's just save this. Now, if I come over here, you can see I have this and I could swap this out, right? So I can actually slide this value. Also notice here, there's no control or limitation as far as what I can input in this. If I really want to control this, I can go back to this parameter. I can start at 0, which is black, which is correct. My slider minimum could be 0, and my maximum could be 1. And now if I save this, and I come over here, it should stop at 1, and it should stop at 0, right? Now, if I actually want the option to be able to have a map, I want to do a couple things. So let me just create a new comment box so that I can have this be organized. And I like to put it in the order of the actual, according to the shader. So I want this to show up under. It feels more organized for me to do that. And let's just say I want to load up some kind of map. I don't have a specific map for metallic for this character because he just doesn't have any. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place a placeholder. I'm just going to drop it in. Now it becomes a texture sample, right? And I can replace this later. I'm going to convert this to a parameter, and I'm going to call this metallic map, okay? And right now, I should just start organizing this. So I have my first group. This will be my second one. So I'm going to name this 02 metallic, and this will be the first one. Well, I'll change the priority later. Let's just set this to also metallic. Okay. And what I want to do is just have this be an option. So I want to actually have the option to use something like this, which gives me a nice slider if in case I don't have a map. And I want to be able to have an option to input a map if I need to. So in order to have the choices for this, I want to create a static switch. So if I go over here and choose static switch parameter, I have true and false, right? Let's call this use map. And by default, it should be false. Okay, so use map. Do you want to use a map? No, I don't want to use a map. So if I don't want to use a map, then it's going to be false and it's going to read this, right? And if I do want to use the map, I'm going to input this in here, and now I have this option. I need to set this under the same group or else it will show up in a weird place. It'll be messy. And I think I want this to show up first. So I set that as the first priority, number 1 here. And then this will be number 2, and this will be number 3. And I can see that they all have the same group. So those show up together. And I'm just going to input this here. And let's save. I never would build a graph completely from scratch in the graph like this, because at some point I could mess up and break something. And I won't really know what broke. So over here, you can see I have metallic, right? And I still have this slider. So by default, this is on because that's what I chose. Let's reset this. And I can check use map and say true. And then now you can see I have some kind of map that pops up. So now he's, there's really, he's a dark metal because I made him metal, right? But now I have an option. I can just, in the future, just drop a map in here. Let's turn this off so I don't have that. And I don't want to use the map, and let's just keep this. So in the future, we'll have this extra option. The next one is I want to have a specular. I'm probably never going to produce a specular map. If you look at xsens, that's just not what it spits out. Like anytime you look at the channels, I have color, height, roughness, normal. It just doesn't work that way. So it's just an extra control I need. So I don't need to do a static switch parameter. I just need something simple as a constant. The one thing I realized, because again, my background is in film, is that in Unreal in particular, you can't put color in specular, which is kind of a huge bummer for me. I wish you could just input color. So all you can do is black and white. So I only need this simple parameter. Let's call this specular. And since this will be pretty simple, let's just call this here specular. I don't need to do a lot other than just set this up and put this in here. Okay, let's save. Let's set this at 1 because it looks strange, right? That should be my default, which means there's no change. The max slider, let's just leave it at 1 for now. And then my minimum slider will be 0. And then now here you can see I have this, right? So now I have this option to increase or decrease this. Okay, let's just leave that there. And so now I have 3 groups, 1, 2, 3. And my next one is roughness. So this one here will be labeled 04 roughness. And I'll just set this priority as 1. And then this one here will be, hold up. This is metallic. Okay, this should be number 3. Oops, I put in the wrong one. Okay. Let's just save that again. Number 4. This will be number 5. Once I type something in here, it will be stored. So I can just manually choose them, right? And let's just set this at 1. Okay. So now I have like a more useful setup. And if I never intended to color correct everything, this could be good enough. But the pipeline to really just come back into Substance just to tweak something and then come back here and import it and then reset it up is like super, super slow. It can take a super long time. And also, we probably want to tweak things according to the shot, according to the lighting. So sometimes, if I change a map, it might affect my other stuff. So it's better just adjust this in the shader according to the shots. So let's just come over here and start building some changes and variations. And I'm going to try to explain it in a way that makes sense to me. What I notice about Unreal is a lot of their nodes, especially for color correction, just seem like very math based, right? So you can't find remap values or certain things that I'm really used to finding in Maya or remapping my colors, stuff that is really, to me, critical, right? How I work in Substance Painter or Mari or Maya, they don't have the same exact nodes, but they're kind of similar. And there's nothing like that in here. I keep looking for it. So I'm just trying to deal with what we have and get used to it. The first thing I want to be able to do is desaturate. So they do have a desaturation node, which is cool, right? So I'm going to plug this in here. And I can just plug this over here in this chain. Let's just move this up here. It's a little bit messy, but it'll be faster. And I'll just put it back later. Now I have desaturation. So I have an input of the map here, but I don't have a controller here. So I want to be able to control this. And I'm going to come back to just using a constant. Okay, so now I have a value. And I want to convert this parameter again so that I can actually control this in my instance material. Let's call this saturation. Okay, let's plug this in. Okay, so it looks like 0. Doesn't really have any effect on it. As I slide this up, forward, you can see it's being desaturated. And if I go negative, it's bringing it backwards. So it's working. Same group here as the albedo. And I'll set this priority to 2. Let's go for the next one. I want to have something where I can actually make it brighter or darker. And the best node for that everyone seems to use is the multiply, which makes sense to me. So multiply is literally like basic math, right? That you learn in school. Depending what value you input, you can make it brighter or darker. But the way I think of it is just if I have a value of 0.5 on my map and I multiply it by 1, there will be no change, right? So 1, I probably want to have my default. If I go back to the 0.5 value and I multiply it a value above 1, so 1.1, for example, the numbers go higher. So I know that I want values being input here to go past 1 so that I can make it brighter. And if I go back to 0.5 and I do something less than 1, you can see it goes darker, right? So I want to be able to do negative values and positive values on this constant I'm about to make here. Let's input this in here, convert this to parameter, and I'll call this brightness. Okay, my default will be 1, which means there's no change, right? And I did decide to be able to cap this at some level. Let me just save this. Okay. Hold on. This is not in a group. So since I didn't group it, it just shows up down here. So you can see the problem. And you can start seeing it show up all over the place, which is not good. Let's just save this again. Okay, so now I have the control here. I don't like being able to go too high on this, right? I don't want to go like 1000 by accident. So for me, even though I wanted to go past, I don't really want to slide it to some crazy level. So I
You
do
don't
want,
want it to go to a place it's never going to go to.
yeah, that's never going to go. And when I'm sliding it, it feels the range is so wide that a little bit of a sliding brings up to like 500. So I want to cap this here, and I'll just cap this at -7. And I think that's fine, right? And that will work out. This priority is should be 2, and I want this to show up under 3. So to me, the one thing to keep in mind is the way that changes roll on this, which is different in any texturing workflow that I'm used to, is that it is going from here to here to here, right? So if I change my saturation, when I change my multiply, it's affecting this one, which seems really obvious, right? But the order actually does kind of matter depending on what you want to do with the maps, right? So I started rearranging this. I want the order to look correct over here because I need to know as I'm looking at it, if I change this is going to affect it first and then this one. So I don't want this order to be really random. It needs to make sense to me. Okay. The next thing I want to be able to have is some kind of contrast. Now, a lot of people use power. Power to me doesn't really make sense as far as what I think contrast is. Contrast, like if you think about Photoshop, is you make when you use the contrast slider, your bright values get brighter and your dark values get darker. This thing just seems to it seems to crunch it and just make everything darker, and that's really weird to me, right? I'll show you, and I know, I'm not like the expert when with this type of stuff, but I still feel like I can't wrap my head around the way it looks visually, right? Um, let's set this to 1, and let's convert this parameter. Let's call this contrast, and let's put it in the same group here, and this will be number 4. 3 is 4. Let's input this in here, and let's bring this over here. Okay, let's save this. When I say stuff like it doesn't make sense to me, it doesn't mean that it's not correct or everyone else is wrong. It's just how I work. I need to make it work in a way that I understand when I'm using this. So as I bring this up, it kind of looks like it's contrasting. That works. But as I bring it down, it just turns like white, right? And that's not what I'm used to. Anytime I'm dealing with some kind of contrast color correction, it should just go gray, right? So I decided not to go with this because I don't want any kind of color correction when I'm contrasting to make it brighter because I already have a brightness. So that for me doesn't work. There is a node here called cheap contrast.
That's a funny name.
Yeah, and there's a few of them, and I tested them out. I went with RGB, right? You can see here as contrast similar to pulling edges in Photoshop levels tool. I don't know why people don't use this primarily or why they use, power over that. But mathematically, power makes no sense. Like I actually, whenever I'm doing with this type of stuff, because they're all math and I'm not very good at it, what I will do is actually go get a calculator to try to understand what it's doing with my values, right? So I did find a power calculator. You can see here is there's base and exponent written here, right? So I know here if my base is 0.5, let's just say that's a value on my map, actually a texture value, and I enter a value of 2 and I calculate, it's making it darker, right? So it does look crunchier, but it's darker. And I don't know. I don't really, it's weird, right? So I don't find that something I want. And I calculate a value less than 1, and then it will start making it brighter. So anyway, for me, mathematically, visually, I don't understand, right? But again, if it works for other people and it looks great, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Let's just reset this here to contrast. why is it looking like this? Let's just save. Turned all back to 0. Okay, so my default should be 0. And I'll just leave this, let's see. I ended up capping it. So basically, when I look at this, oops, and I start sliding this one around, there is a point where I just go, I don't really want this. I do want to control what you can do, right? So I decided I wanted to cap the maximum at 0.2. This is enough. At no point past this value, or even at this level, does that really look good, right? So I decided capping it there. And then here, I want to see where I'm going to cap this. And I decide to cap it where it just becomes gray. So this is more of what I would expect in some kind of contrast. So I'm going to cap this at negative 0.4. That way, whatever I'm looking at makes sense. And my default will be 0, which means there is no effect, right? So, so far, all these are set to default values that have no actual change in it. Now, the last one I want to do is I want to be able to tint the color, right? And the multiply node, I think, works really well. So I'm going to input a multiply. And then what I want to do, since I want color, instead of going with the single constant, I want to have a 3 vector. That way I can have RGB values. Okay. I'm going to convert this. Let's call this multiply. Or let's call it albedo tint. That's really what it is. Okay, I can't seem to spell. Let's throw this under albedo. And this should be priority 5. And this should be white. So remember basic math, anything multiplied by 1 doesn't change. Let's plug this in here. Let's save. Okay, and let's come over here. Now I have this control. And if I need to tint him a little bit warmer, which is nice. Sometimes I might want to go warmer, maybe not this character, but a different character, particularly the extras, right? Now I can have slight changes in their skin tone. I can make someone a little bit brighter and cooler, or more orange if I need to. Let's reset this. Okay, so these work well. All right, so that's good for the albedo. The metallic is already pretty much set up. My specular is all I really need, so I'm going to leave those alone. And then the roughness is I want to be able to adjust this. And this one's pretty simple. I just want to be able to multiply this over something, right? So multiply is good for me. If I go past values of 1, it will make it brighter, which will make it drier. If I go values below 1, it will make the map darker. And let's see if I cap this. I did actually cap this. Let's create constant. It's just 0 to 1, convert to parameter. And let's call this roughness multiply. This should be under my roughness group. And for whatever reason, I decided to cap this at 21. And let's leave it as 1 as default. And let's save. I want to make sure everything works, so I'm not surprised at the end. We can see it update here. So you can see if I go values high, it becomes drier because the map becomes brighter, meaning it's more rough. And if I go lower, it becomes more wet. So the map is darker, so it is less rough. Okay, so that works here. Now let's get some control for this. I've seen multiple different tutorials. Some of them look really complicated, but this one works really great. So I'm not sure why. I can understand you want to change certain things, like if you're trying to layer something, but I don't see a need to make it more complicated. So I have normal map input that goes into normal. And then the flatness value, which can control how flat it's going to be.
So that's the flatten normal node.
Yes, this is a flattened normal node. Let's call this normal strength. Let's put this under category of normal, which this has something wrong. So I called this metallic by accident. Okay. If you end up deleting the namings of the group, it actually removes it from here, which is good. That way you don't have all these unnecessary naming. And let's just plug this in here. And let me save this. Okay, and let's jump over here. Let's look at this lit. And let's turn this on. So as I bring this up and I hit, say, a value of 1, you can see what it does. It's actually flattened this all out, right? If I keep going past 1, what it will do is invert the map, which is, I think, is kind of nice, kind of neat, right? Now, if I go in negative values, what it does here is it actually makes it stronger. So this is a pretty good node. It doesn't just flatten. All right, so here's like my basic one. Now, on top of all this, I remember there was a question where someone asked in the chat if I was planning to, or we were planning to add subsurface scattering, and the answer is no. Back then we said it's because it's more expensive and stuff like that. Part of the reason is like we didn't plan for it to be this way, right? From the very beginning, maybe it's not that expensive, but I don't think subsurface scattering is actually going to improve what this character looks like because he's not skin, right? Even though you're not skin, though, multiple different materials can have subsurface scattering, right? So things like wax, marble, or something like that, right? Or foods will have subsurface scattering. In this case, he's basically like a clay doll, and he's painted. And paint doesn't have subsurface scattering. Maybe it has something in real life, but in the world of CG, generally paint doesn't really have that. So he was never really designed or sculpted and textured in a way where subsurface scattering works. So when I add subsurface scattering, which is what I'm about to do, it doesn't look better. It actually, I think, looks kind of worse. And it's because he's not been designed that way, right? So subsurface scattering, just because you apply it onto a shader or character or whatever it is, doesn't automatically turn it into like some kind of skin, right? I will show what that looks like just to fulfill curiosity. I'm going to select my material here, and I'm going to go under shading model, and I'm going to change this to subsurface profile. And then it's going to ask for some kind of profile. I'm going to go over here and just go under demo, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go under materials, and then we have subsurface profile. Okay, and I'll just call this like demo subsurface P, so for profile, and then I can just hook this up in here. Okay, and I can save this. Okay, so you can see the change already. I don't really think this looks better. I'm going to double click on my profile that's inside my content folder so I can have additional control. But to me, he starts to look kind of plasticky, right? Let me just move this over here. I can adjust my units right here, my world scale, and you can see I have more subsurface scattering. And I don't really think that looks better. If I adjust also the mean free path distance, you can actually see it changing, right? Let me check my lighting, my scene. Everything should be off because it looks not quite like what I think. Let's reset this. But yeah, to me, he just looks more hollow, right? It just makes him look more like plastic. If you ever look at plastic dolls, there's a feeling of hollowness in it. And I don't think this actually looks better. He looks, I mean, do you think he looks like plastic? I think he looks like plastic.
Yeah.
So I decided not to even go with that for that reason. So I can just change this back to just default. Let's just undo. If I do multiple undos, it doesn't crash this, does it? Like Maya. Let's just save this.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's still attached here, but it doesn't have subsurface. And I actually think this looks way better. I did actually do a comparison here for this character, right? So we can kind of see how they look. And I'm not surprised that it doesn't look better. I know it without trying it out, but I think it's good to try it out. But he just looks more hollow inside, like literally to me.
You lose the facets too.
Yeah, you lose the facets. There is also change on the specular. But yeah. So let's just leave that alone. Let's just come back here and close this. Okay. So this is the basic setup for the father. Now, I need to create something much more complex. Over here, if we look at this character, let me just pull up the material. Okay. You can see there's a lot of control here. I have paint color, right? So I can really change this. Let's just bring it back to this value. I also have a mask. So there's a mask input into this that is controlling where this paint shows up. Okay. And my roughness, the other thing I have going on is I need to be able to control my roughness independently, right? So I have a roughness controller for my skin. And I also have a controller here. So if I come over here, I can make the paint more dry. I can make it more glossy, right? I also have this controller for my normals, for my character, right? Where I can change the character himself, although don't feel like it's changing. Nope, it's changing. There we are. Yes, really overcranked. And then I have the controller here for the paint. So you can see I'm trying to flatten it out, right? Or I can just increase it. And this was more complicated. So it goes back into painting and figuring out how to set this up. Let me show the final. Find the parent, the master material. Okay. And this is not so bad. Basically, I have the mask. I put a lerp, which is like a merge node or a blend node, depending on what software you use. And that's controlling all this here. So this one's okay.
A lerp is like a merge node, essentially.
Yeah, it's like a merge.
Yeah.
Or blend, depending, again, whatever you're used to. So let's come over here. I'm going to demonstrate on this girl how I did this for the face. The clothing was more complicated. And I'm doing it on her because she has more materials. So the men are more simple. if you look in my scene, right? They don't have as much going on or as much accessories. And the women have a little bit more. So this is my layer, my layers, all my stuff that I did in here, right? So it's really long. I'm not particularly disorganized. I'm somewhat organized, but not crazy organized. So it's not so bad to do this.
She's crazy organized.
I don't think I'm super organized. But if you are really disorganized and you paint disorganized in any texturing software, you're going to have a very hard time pulling out your mask and everything you need. I worked organized enough, right? So if we go over here, I have two main layers right here. I have a paint color, which contributes to my color. And you can see this takes a moment to update. If I turn it off, this should shut this off. Okay. And then here, you can still see I still have height control on top of this, right? So I decided to control the height separately. So I can get the height to look nicer and a little bit more bubbly. We're probably never going to get this close, right? Let's turn off the height control so you just can see what that looks like. Okay. I can actually add the height in here. So this is going to substance and getting a little bit nerdy. But if you take a look, it doesn't really look as nice, at least in my opinion, right? A lot of times when I'm working, let's just bring this up to 0.6. What I will do if I want to compare something is I'm just going to take a quick screenshot and I'm going to drop this into Pure Rough and I'm going to crop this out. Okay, now I know what this looks like if I do it this way, right? Now, again, I don't want to do it that way. What I have here is something more complex. And you have to know how to use anchors. So maybe all the Unreal stuff is very straightforward and simple, and you might know how to do it already. Some of this stuff here I know is in Substance Painter that I'm doing is more advanced. So we're going from simple to pretty advanced. Okay, so the way I have this set up is if you look at this here, I can isolate my mask, but if I hover over this and I hold Alt and I click on this, and I have multiple anchors. What an anchor does is captures an image so that I can reuse it later, right? I actually want to make adjustments of this mask, but only the adjustments that affect height, not the actual paint mask, right? If I adjust this to look good for my height, it's going to mess up my color map. So they have to be treated independently. So let's go over to what I have here. What I did is I created a fill. So if you go over to the magic wand, you can drop a fill. And in this fill, I can click on this, right? And I can load the anchor. So I decide to load paint mask. Also notice when I scroll through this, you can see where it's highlighting, meaning it's reading this mask. So what I have right now in here should be pretty identical. Although there's looks like some weird minor change for some reason. But it should be correct. Okay. Oh, I have a different one. It's fine. Let's not get into that. What I'm going to do next is I want to blur this and I'm going to level it so that I have a smaller image. Now you do have to blur because if you just try to create a levels, right? I'll just do this from scratch. It's not quite going to do what I want it to do. So I want to soften it a little bit and I'm going to blur it, do the levels. And then I'm going to pull the same anchor that I have here. Okay. Now what I did next, this would be default, set a normal, as I set a difference. So it's creating a subtraction, right? And what this does, if you look carefully, is it's lifting my edges, right? So I have all the edges, and this is going to help me get a peeled effect on the paint. Okay. And so now if I come over here and I lift this up and down, let's start at 0. And I scroll this, increase the value, you can see that we're cranked, but you can see it's giving me this kind of bubbling edge effect, which looks much nicer than just lifting it up. So let me just input a value here that is not so strong. I think I like it at 0.05. And if I take a screenshot, do a quick comparison, and I do work like this, so I can see what I'm doing. We now have the comparison, right? So one is a little bit better than the other one, or at least to me, like a lot better, right? It might be a little bit intense. I can control the strength of this later. Okay, so this is my setup here. Now I want to take this and just be able to hide it like this, because in order to be able to swap out the paint mask, I need to have a base that doesn't have any kind of paint on top of it, right? But I do want to take this information that I painted and be able to separate it. So I have an anchor here on top of my mask that's going to capture this. And I do have a top anchor here that also captures this information. So let's come back here. Let's look at just this. And I'm going to do this outside of this group. And what I want to do now is I want to create a couple things. So let's just turn this off. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to get rid of these because I manually added them. And I want to create extra channels. So channels will basically export when I just go to export textures, right? I want to create like extra utility textures that don't affect the main thing, that upon export, it's just going to spit it out automatically. So I don't have to do weird exporting stuff. What I mean by weird exporting stuff is turning it on, hitting export, turning it off, and then turning on another layer and hitting, turning on another layer and then hitting export. It's not a very organized way to work. If I go back to the file and look at it again, I won't really know what the heck I did, right? So I really want to have this export into additional channels. I'm going to go over here, go to where it says channels. I'm going to hit the plus and I go over to user channel. And I already used user 1 for user 0 for something else. So I want to use user 1 and user 2 channels. Now, these are all existing, right? So if I go over here to materials, I can see my channels. So I see my base color, right? I'll see my roughness, basically what I expect. And you can see I have user 1 and 2. Now, I can put any kind of weird stuff in here under user 1, right, or 2. I can make a red color, and you can see this should feel red. Oh, it's not on. And you can see if I go back here, it shouldn't really have an effect as long as I'm only affecting these two. So let me just do this properly. Let's go over here. And this first one, I want it to be a mask. Right now, this format says L32-bit float. I think I can just do a 8-bit. So I'm going to do a linear 8-bit. So I change this to L8. And I'm going to name this something that I'm going to understand later, right? So this will be where my paint masks sit. And I'm going to do underscore U1. That way I know that's user 1 channel, because you have to actually track this in order to export this correctly, or else it's not going to export right when you hit the export button, right? So this will be my first one. The next one, I want it to be a normal. So I want to do paint normal underscore U2. So it's user 2 channel. And this is linear 32-bit float, which is not correct for normap. I'm going to copy the same settings under normal, which is RGB 16 float. Okay. So now I can load this correctly. Now I want to load the data in here. And when I create a fill layer, it's very simple. You just hit this button and this will pop up. You can see in a moment once it loads, because it's kind of slow, it's going to overtake all this other stuff. That's why it's going to turn white, right? Well, there we are, finally. Now, I don't want to actually have effect on these other channels. So as soon as I turn them off, you can see that they don't actually contribute anymore. And if I look at paint mask, I can see this information shows up. So this is pretty simple. All I have to do is go over here where I can load my textures, go to anchors, and I'm going to load paint mask. And while that's loading, let's just rename this to paint mask underscore U1. Okay, so this is perfect, right? Now, when I go to export, it's going to export these channels and I'm going to get this one, which is what I want. So this one's super simple. The normal map one is not simple for many reasons. Why? It's one, you're dealing with color, right? And second, I didn't actually, while I was working on all this stuff, actually create normal maps. I basically work on height, right? So I alter my height channels, as you can see here. Now, the way Substance is designed is it actually spits out this channel. So this channel says normal plus height plus mesh, right? So it's adding everything in together as a normal map at the end, right? So that makes this whole thing a little bit more complicated. So it's not so easy. And you can see my normal map is actually empty, okay? So I have to actually work in a way like, outside of it a little bit and just force this to export. So what I'm going to do here is I create a folder and I'm going to call this paint normal. And this is kind of like, it's a folder to isolate from everything else I'm doing, right? So it's kind of containing it. It's kind of like whenever you're trying to do math, and let's say you're not good at math like me, and you're trying to work out your calculations. So this is what I'm basically doing in this folder, right? I'm going to create a new fill, and I have to work in height because that's how I worked. That's how everything exists. And this first one is going to be called blank. And you can see it only affects my height. The next thing I want to do is I want to load the actual height map. So I'm going to call this paint height. And I'm going to apply a mask because, again, this is how I worked on the previous setup. And I'm going to alt click and you can see it's black. I'm going to drop a fill in here and I'm going to pull my height anchor right here, right? So this is the anchor that I created down here, right here. So once I drop this anchor, you can see that it looks identical. The anchoring thing, the important thing to understand is that whatever changes I do down here will actually propagate up here, right? So they are linked. Okay, so this looks okay. Now I'm going to input a value. Let's just do 0.5. Okay, and it looks really intense because it's being multiplied on top of other stuff. Actually, it is actually just too big. Let's do 0.5. All right, so this looks somewhat okay. Now the problem with this is this height is not isolated from the height of my skin. And the main thing is that it has to be, right? The way that Substance works is if I go to my height channel, so I just switched out to height, is that this is set to linear dodge, right? If you look at any other channel, it's set to normal mode, which means it overrides. Linear dodge is a default setup inside of Substance allows us to constantly add more data on top so you're not overriding it, which is really great when you're just working with it straight. It's complicated when you're trying to set up other stuff. If I take this mode on my group and I change it to normal, you can see that it's hidden everything. And if I look closely, I have only the height information here. And if I come back here, it's become very smooth across the surface, right? And I only have this. So this is great. Now I want to capture this data and I have to convert this into a normal map. Okay, so this is another step. I'm going to create a paintable layer. And paintable layer is just, you can paint on it. Now, what makes it special is that if I change this mix mode to pass through, what it does is it acts like a flattened layer, right? So if you know Photoshop, you know that how to flatten layers, right? It basically merges everything into one layer. But here, since this is set to pass through, what it will do is act like a flattened layer without actually flattening anything below it. But the data in here is flattened and captured. Now, what I'm going to do after that, because the data of my height is captured in here, right? This is what my height looks like. I'm now going to create a filter. And what this filter is going to do is it's going to convert my height into a normal map. So I'm going to do height to normal. Okay, now if I go into normal, I now have data here. So before it was completely empty. So automatically it's pushing it into my normal channel. Now it looks really crazy intense. So I'm gonna dial it down to a value like this, 0.3. That looks much better. And now the problem is it's sitting in my normal channel, which won't work because remember what substance will spit out is normal plus height plus mesh, right? So now I have it stuck in here. Okay, so this is the stuff that makes it more complex. So I'm going to take this to work around this. I'm going to create an anchor, which is going to capture everything here. It's going to capture that channel, and I'm going to hide this so it turns it off. But all my calculations and stuff are still sitting here. Now I'm going to create a fill, and I'm going to call this paint normal underscore U2. And I'm only going to have my user channel paint normal on, okay, the custom created one. And let's go over to U2, and you can see it's white. And I'm going to use this anchor here, and I'm going to capture this pass through. Right now you can see nothing shows up. It's because it's reading U2. I need to actually read the normal. Okay, so once I did this, this is working. But notice if you actually pay attention, it actually flipped my normals, my green channel. So I have to go over to my levels, which thankfully, whenever you create an anchor, it also comes with the levels, right? And if I go over here, I can isolate to my green channel and I can invert this. And now it's actually going the right direction. So you can see it's actually flipping, right? So let's keep it invert. Let's invert over here. And now this is pretty good to go, right? If I look in here, everything looks fine. I have my user 1 channel and my user 2 channel. Okay, so that's good for that. Now, I have to have a way of exporting this, right? So I'm going to go over to export textures over here. And I have all these templates, right? So there's all the stuff you can choose. I have my own custom one that is really long now because that's what I modified for this project. So that's why it's called V-Ray Metallic Roughness Koa. As far as why I started with V-Ray is because I'm a V-Ray user and I just know this template and it gives me what I want. But it's not, obviously this is not going to V-Ray, but it can work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this and mess this one up, right? So the first thing I look at with the template is I look at my normal direction. So if you look over here carefully, if you can see, and if you can't see because it's streaming, I have 2 formats. I have DirectX and I have OpenGL. V-Ray uses OpenGL, Unreal does not, right? So the first thing I actually want to do is to make sure that this can work on Unreal. If I mouse over this right here, the font again is very small, but this is my normal channel that exports, right? So I'm going to correct this by just dropping DirectX into here, and I'm going to say from RGB. So now you can see that the color code matches here, right? So you can tell where things are linked. So this is fixed. The next thing I'm going to do is I need to create additional channels. My first one is just black and white, so I'm going to just create a gray channel, and I'm going to link my user 1, and I'm going to drop it in here. I'm going to go from gray channel. So now this will export. Now the naming is messed up. So you want to change the naming to something that makes sense. So instead of, I'm just going to copy this command and I'm going to replace the channel name here. All these commands here start with $. That's how you know that's command. Base color doesn't have one. So that's what actual the channel name is. And I can call this paint mask, right? Now the next one is a norm map. So I should replicate what my normal is. And you can see this says RGB. So I'm going to do RGB so it's correct. And then I'm going to link user 2 over here and go RGB. And now you can see this is linked. And I just will copy the same command. And this will be called paint normal. Now, once I have this template, when you go to export, you actually have to choose the same one. So here, this is called copy one, which is kind of hard for me to figure out which one is what. So I'm going to call this demo. And as long as I choose the correct template, it will actually export the map properly, right? And then I can choose my format. So that takes care of that. Let's close this. The next thing, hold on, are we good on time?
You're fine.
I'm taking a very long time.
That's okay. It's okay.
I'm very sorry if this is dry, but this is what goes
I think
into
you
it.
should do it even if you take up the whole stream,
Okay.
or else, what was the point? You know what I mean?
Well, yes, it's not very
Yeah.
thorough, and then
Yeah.
I can't do this in 5 minutes.
Yeah. Do it right.
Yeah, do it right or don't do it at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go over to my clothing here. So I jumped from my body to my clothes, and now I can see all my texture sets for my clothes. I have a mixture of patterns and clothing. And again, this comes down to how organized you are. So I want to be able to correct it according to my actual fill materials here, right? So here, if you look at this material and I isolate my mask, you can see this whole region is fixing this one, right? And then this one is coloring this one. Now, on top of all this stuff, I have these patterns. They're called knit 10. They're only called knit 10 because they're named after my source. So I name my files after my actual texture sources so I can figure out what I use later on if I reopen the file. But here you can see I have all these extra patterns, right? And what I've done for everything that actually contributes to the final look is I've given it an anchor. So there are a ton of anchors in this. And so this takes a little bit more organization. Now, the masking is just black and white. If I export individual mask for all of this, I'll end up with like, 6 masks or something like that, 6 individual masks, which is a lot to juggle. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to stack them and create RGB mask. And then I'm going to split them apart inside of Unreal afterward. Okay, so let's just jump up here. And let's set this up. So here I'm going to create again, folder so I can contain my calculations or my work, right? And let's just call this mask A. The next thing I'm going to do is auto saving, which it should be auto saving to my drive. Okay. Is I deleted some user channels. I'm going to do it from scratch. Now, I already used user 1 for something else here. And I use user 1 and 2 for my body. I don't want to do the same thing for this one. I want to keep them separate. I'm going to use user 3. The reason being is it comes back down to how my templates are set up, right? So my template setup when I'm using this is set up a certain way to read certain colors. So if I do some kind of work and I'm using the same user channel, all of a sudden it spits out a gray map, and that's not what I want. Or this is a RGB 16 float, and that's not what I want either, right? So I want to have unique setup. So I'm going to use user 3 and user 4. So I'm going to have 2 masks. This will be called mask A underscore U3. So I remember it's user 3. And this will be mask B underscore U4. And these will be colored maps. So I need to use a color format. I'll just match my base color, which is sRGB 8. And I'll do the same here. So now I have 2 color user nodes. And let's jump over here. Now I'm going to have to pipe it into there first, or at the end. But first, I'm just going to keep it very simple. Now I'm going to create 4 fill layers. And I'm only going to contribute to the color. And this will be similar to how I dealt with the normals. I will turn this off and then redirect it later. My first layer here, I just want to have black, right? So black will be no mask data, right? Not everything has RGB values. So if you don't have anything, you want to have black underlying underneath. This one will be red. And I'll color this red. I'm going to make sure I'm going under RGB, that red is at 1 maximum and green and blue are at 0. So there's no contribution to those channels. And I'm going to put this one as green, and I'm going to do the same thing. Make sure green is at 1 and red and blue are at 0. And then let's do this one blue, and let's do the same thing. So let's do blue at 1, green and red are at 0. Okay, so now I have this like this. Okay, and let's turn these off and let's do one by one. So my red one, I'm going to apply a mask. I'm going to drop a fill in here, which then allows me to read my anchors. I'm going to go over my anchors, and I'm going to try to be organized. Okay, so if I come back here, I think some of my naming for my anchors are weird. It means I didn't name things right, so I don't understand what I'm looking at. I'm going to come back down and double check my naming. And you can see here, I want these passes. I'm just going to add 1 and 2. That way they kind of make sense to me in some level. And let's bring in number 1. So here's my first one. Now, if I come back here and we take a look, that's basically masking this material here. And you can see that it doesn't mask necessarily all of it, right? I do have more that I want to input in here that have the same color. So I'm going to drop in another anchor and mask 2. So now I have 2 of the same colors in here, right? Now the problem is this one is overriding on top of this. So basic Photoshop, right? What do you have to do? I'm going to set this to screen. So if I come back here and I have this on, it is masking the correct areas. So we'll just do this so we can see it clearly. And I'll turn off the black for now. Let's do the green. Let's create a black mask. Let's drop a fill. And for this one, let's put the knit white one. And all this is being organized according to the color, right? So I have my white ones here. And let's do some of the gold threading that I have over here. And my blue one. And let's add a fill. And these are called straight thread. And another straight thread. Let's screen this. Okay. And then now I have this. So now if I come back here and I turn on my black layer and look at my base color, I have all this stacked up. Okay, now let's hide this. Or let's actually duplicate it. Because I have another one that I want to do. And I don't want to set everything up from scratch. Let's call this B. Okay. Let's delete these masks. I want to set them up from the beginning. And let's turn this on. The thing that makes this one difficult, so I'm not a super technical person, but there is some like calculations that happen in my head, right? I would say like I'm good at shape math, meaning like color visual math, because there is some of that. If I look at this mask that I have set up here, that's blocking out the color for this, it's actually masking out everything, right? And same with this. So I have this blocked out here and it's masking out everything. Now I also have this yellow texture right here that's being controlled here, and it's on top of everything. So these masks are not so simple. I have to do some subtraction. Basically, all of my fine details on top have to be masked out for this to be correct. So what I'm going to do in this group right here, mask B, is I'm going to create a new fill layer. And I'll just make it black just because. And I'm going to call this combined. And I'm going to combine everything here, all my details, to be able to subtract it. Let's create a mask first. And I'm going to drop in the fill. Let's go over here and let's start adding basically all my details. So I'm going to set this to screen. Let's add more fills. You do have to be organized to do this stuff, I think. I don't think I'm the most organized, but I think I would have a very hard time if I was extremely disorganized. Okay, let's add my thread. Set this to screen. And let's do, I think, only one more. my vertical thread, and this is set to screen. Okay. So now I have this. Looks like it's masking it out correct. I did do some color correction to the mask. So you can see it's not taking it all in. In particular, it's the threading. So I can crunch some of my threads a little bit more. And this works. I'm going to put an anchor here so this captures this image. And then I'm going to hide this and just turn this on. So let's do my first cloth section. I'm going to add a fill. And I'm going to drop in my first cloth chunk, which is skirt 1. Okay. Now I'm going to put another fill. And I'm going to bring the ones that I actually combined in here. And I actually want to invert this. So I'm going to invert this and I'm going to multiply, which now subtracts that shape. So this is like my shape math, or at least that's what I think is shape math, right? So now I have a nice clean mask of that area. And then let's do green. Let's add a mask here. And let's do the same thing. I'm going to add this chunk here, this color block. I'm going to add this fill and then add my combined. I set this to multiply and invert. Okay, so now I have a nice clean chunk here. This last one's a little bit more complicated because it doesn't have a mask, right? So I have to do multiple layers. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring in my base cloth, this one. And I'm going to bring my other one. Okay. And I actually want to invert this. And I'm going to multiply. And then I want to have this inverted. So now I have this opposite shape by doing all this stuff here. Now I'm going to bring in my combine over here, invert this, and set this to multiply. And now I have this correct one. Okay. I know this is probably not the most exciting thing, but this is stuff you have to deal with in pipeline. That's why things take so long to get done. Okay, so now I have clean mask here.
This is going to speed things up.
Yes.
Past this point.
Past this point, it's going to be super fast.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I have these two. They are sitting in my base color, which I don't want, right? So what do I have to do? I'm going to capture everything here. I'm going to create a pass-through in my base color because that's where my data is sitting. I'm going to call this mask A pass-through. And I'm going to drop an anchor. Okay, so now that I have that anchor, if I create a new fill and I only have my user channel mask A selected, I'm going to put in the mask pass-through. It's going to ask what reference channel. It's referencing my base color. So now if I go over to user 3, I have this pop up. Now let's do the same thing over here. Let's just look at user 4. We can see that's empty. I'm going to create a mask B pass-through. This actually would be easier if this could work as a node graph. All this stuff is not really theoretically that complicated. It's just being made complicated when you work in a layer system instead of a node graph. Okay, so now I have that captured. I'm going to call this mask A. This will be mask B. And once I have this set up, there's a couple of things I can do to save my work. So I don't have to keep doing this over and over for each thing. Let's put my pass through here. And now I have this here. Now if I check my channels, they look correct. And I'm ready to export once I set up the template over here. So let me go back to my template. I'm going to create 2 RGBs. These are going to link to, this is going to be user 3. And this will be user 4. Those are channels that I used. Okay. And I just have to make sure that the naming makes sense. I would just call this mask A. and this will be mask B. And then this gives me everything. I just hit export. Okay. All right. So what you can do to kind of save you a lot of time for some of this. I'm not going to save this. I'm going to show you how I have this set up so that when I paint in the future, it's much faster. So the initial setup is very slow. Just give me a moment to load this file. Okay. Okay, so let me open this file here. It's going to take a second. This is a much lighter file, which I want to be lighter. Okay. So what I have here is basically all my texture. This is a texture of one of my extras that's baked out. So you can see here, I'm just loading in this baked out texture from my previous files, right? So it doesn't have all this stuff. And then what I have here is a smart material that I've set up. So a smart material allows me to reset up all my stuff onto a new scene. The way it works is something simple like this, right? Let's say I create a group. It's going to be according to group. And I have a layer here. And this one has some green crap. And then this one here, red crap. This one will be green then, right? And I start doing just stuff and adding complexity. So I'm just making kind of some garbage, but it's going to be good enough garbage so you understand how this works. I can also have paint nodes in here that allows me to paint, right? And then I'm going to name this group. I'm going to call this Tran garbage. Now, once I have this, I can create a smart material. When I right click, I did this kind of fast. You right click, you look for create smart material, and then this will pop up here, and it's named after Tran garbage. Now, if I ever go into a new file and I want this complicated system, I can just drag and drop this in, and you can see it's transferred over, and I still have everything that I set up, right? So I created a smart material based on my previous scene, basically how it's working. In my smart material, all my users' channels are set up, right? And you can see I have all this stuff here. So now, while I'm working on this, I can go over here. These are all my paint layers. And I can create a new paint layer. Let me select a better brush than what I have here. So I have a bunch of brushes I called Koa, which match, so I can recognize it's for this project. And now if I come in here, I can paint all this, right? And it's working dynamically. Now I do have more complex setup inside this. My paint that actually doesn't look this nice by itself. It just has overlays of cracks. So these are all procedural stuff I've set up. This is kind of cool. I can give this rotation variation so it helps give it some streaks, and then I have some cracks on top, right? And then that's all I have to do. I just have to paint this, and I have to paint what I think looks nice. Once that's done, and it's pretty fast because of the way I've set up all this stuff with these extra cracks and textures on top to make it look nicer, all I have to do is hide this, right? And I can then look inside my user 1 pass, and you can see it's already set up in user 2. I don't have to do anything else after that. I just have to paint it, looks good, hide it, and then just export that. And I can export just these two. And you can just control it here, right? You can tell it what to export. I want to export from the body, and I only have those 2 channels exported. And under my list of exports, it's only set to export that. So now I can just open this file, do a bunch of stuff really quickly, and it's going to be light. It only has 2 maps I have to worry about, which is the mask and the normal. Okay, so that's, I don't know, takes some setup, but it's going to speed up a lot of things like crazy. Now, if I jump back in here to Unreal, I have to now set this up. So I want to do this. Let's see. I did this with the father textures. Let's do it on this guy. He has the same UVs. And what I want to do instead is apply this material, which is sitting in my demo, onto this. Okay, so now they look the same. And instead here, I'm just going to replace my base textures that I've already exported. I think all my stuff looks weird. Yeah. What I'm looking at, I just got confused because the icon sometimes shows like the wrong textures. So it looked like the wrong character. So I just want to double check that. Okay, so let's put this in here. You can see I have that base. Let's drop my normal and my roughness. Okay, so this is simplified. And let's go over here. Actually, let's just replace this too, because I'm going to get confused while I'm working. I don't have metallic. Let's have my roughness. Okay. Okay, so now I have this all set up without any kind of paint. Now, what I want to do here is I know that this is going to get long and complicated. Let me just fix this. Let's put this up here. And I'm going to make sure while I'm doing this, I actually screw up a lot. I don't want to screw up while I have all these people watching me. So I'm going to double check my work. Hold up. Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm like lost. Okay. I think we're low on time.
I would just show it.
You would just show it?
Yeah, just take the whole time.
No, I won't be able to get off to breaking out the clothing though. But I think this one is not so bad. Okay, so here.
I think even if you go past 2 hours, it's fine.
Just have it? Okay.
Yeah. Or else it was an hour and 30 minutes with no conclusion.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to import my mask here. Again, I'm just confused when I'm looking at the stuff because it's not this, it actually looks like that. So I'm looking at it carefully and trying to drag it in. That's why you see me kind of fumbling. So I have my mask here. And what I want to do is I want to set up a lerp. I've seen people talk about lerp. If you type lerp, you're like, well, what is that, right? It's not actually any one of those lerp nodes. It's actually called linear interpolate, and that's lerp. But that is super confusing. So, you know, if you're new to the interface, maybe not new to concepts, you'll just be kind of looking at like what happened. So that took me a moment.
Yeah, I wanted to show stuff. She just took up the whole time.
Was
Someone just asked, why are you making Tran do all the work?
Well, there were sessions I didn't talk at all. So today I'm talking.
Today she took it all.
Yeah. So I'm going to create a constant 3 vector. This way, this is going to be my paint color. And I'm going to convert this to a parameter, and I'm going to call this paint color. Type space here. And I want to put this under its own thing. So I'm just going to call this 01. I actually renamed this a lot cleaner. But I don't want to rename the other ones. So normally I would want to put this as number 2, but it's going to stack up weird. So let's just input this here. I'm going to convert this to a parameter. So this is something that I can constantly replace, right? So let's call this paint mask. Okay. And this one will have the same one. This will be number 1, and this will be number 2. Okay. So mask just goes right into the alpha. And I'm going to input this as B. So basically, these two should be overlaying on top of each other. Let's preview this one. So what I did is I right-click to preview this before I connect it to the network, just to check to see if it's working. So if you look here, you can see I have this black color, which is kind of weird. So let's just tint this something else. All right, so this is a better starting point for me. Black is just hard for me to look at because it's not the color of our world. And then I'm just going to take this and import into this, plug this into the base color. Right, so this one's super simple. I'm going to save, make sure it's actually working. Go over here, and okay, now I have a slot to replace this, and I can color correct this.
Just the paint.
Yeah, and it's flat, so that's where.
Which, just in case anybody's tuning in at this point, the whole point of this is that we have to fill up an entire city or a crowd of extras. So these are like our B-level characters. So this is just a faster way of getting paint variations, color variations, all done in Unreal rather than having to take 100 models into Substance and do each one separately.
Yeah. So this actually, I don't need all this space. Let's pull this back down. And let's go over here and set up the normal first. So I want to use my normal map. This is the one I export. So this is the second map for this. And I'm going to drop it in here. And then what I'm going to do is convert this to a parameter so I can replace this. This will be called paint normal. And this will be under the same group as normal. And let's have this one show up in a way that makes sense in the order. In this case, I put number 3 because this one's number 2. Okay. Now I want to use the same node, which is flat normal. Okay, so I'm going to input this in here, and I need a normal strength. So let's just create a new constant, convert this to parameter, and let's call this normal paint strength. Set this also to normal, and this should be number 4. So this is 3, 4. And now I have a controller here. And my default value should be at 0. Okay, so this is set up. Now I need to be able to combine this. So the node that you want to use to be able to mix normal maps is blend angle corrected normals. Okay. And I'm going to put my base normal, which is my character. And then I'm going to apply this. Now what I'm going to do is just input this. And I'm going to save. So all those other ones that are like these nodes here, they're not accessible, which you don't really want to be accessible in the instance. But all my converted parameters are. And let's just see if this works. It's actually working already. I can, let's see, flatten this out. So now it looks flat. Can invert it. Okay, so that's all working fine. And let's just check to make sure this is working. And that's also working. So the skin is actually not too bad. Let's come back over here. And I would like to have some kind of control in my roughness, right? So that it's not just stuck with the same thing. It would be nice if I can make the paint more wet or dry. This one's pretty simple. What I want to do is use the same bases here. I didn't export something separate. I don't think I really need it. That's probably too complicated. Let's create a multiply. And I also want to create controller like this. Let's create constant. Convert this to parameter. And I'm going to rename this roughness multiply paint. It's kind of long naming, but I think it's okay. And let's do the same. So let's set this at 1 as default and 21 max. Okay, so now I have a separate control for this. Now this control has to be driven by my mask up here, right? Otherwise, it's just going to control everything. It's going to be confusing. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create a lerp, which is linear interpolate. And I'm going to plug this in here to be the control. And then I'll have my A be here. So this will be on top. And my B will be in the bottom. And I'm just going to plug this into roughness. And I'm going to save. Come over here. And then see if this is changing correctly. Yes. So I've lowered my roughness on the paint. So this is all correct. So the characters weren't so difficult. The clothing was a little bit more because it has more to mix, right? So as far as how I did the clothing, and this is where I think can get very confusing when I try to explain this. Let me find the parent. Let's do this actually. I want to duplicate this one because the clothing should have its own master material. And let's rename this here because it says master, even though it's not. Okay, and let's create an instance for my clothing. Let's just call it clothing. I'm going to apply this right here so it looks all weird. But that's okay because I'll just replug this in. And I'm going to strip some of this out. Or ignore some of this, actually. I think that sorry guys. Realize that this is not going to be explained very well.
Why not?
Well, the way I'm doing it right now.
Oh, you're doing good though.
Now it just has a couple of things that I don't want in this. I think I want to start with a more basic one. This one actually has too much stuff. Let's delete some of this stuff. That's probably the best, easiest way to do this. And let's delete this. So this is my clothing one. I'm kind of removing the stuff I don't need. So it's not so dirty and convoluted. Let's get rid of this slurp. Okay. I need a faster way to connect this. Okay, so this is super basic again. Let's save this. Let's close these. Simplify what I'm staring at. And here's my instance here. And I'm just going to load in the correct textures. So I'm putting in my clothing textures. And I don't have the slot from metallic anymore. Let's save this. Okay. The one thing I did do, if you notice the clothing is really light, I did go back and actually make the clothing lighter, because when the clothing is too dark, there's not a lot I can color correct with it. It's really hard to actually change it. So I made it a light pink, and it's very easy to darken. I'm going to put in here the proper metallic map, and I'm going to convert this to parameter. I'm going to call this metallic.
People are saying you're doing really good.
Oh, thank you. Because I'm like, oh crap, I'm so boring. Okay, let's plug this in here. And let's group this under number 2. My naming is probably going to be really disorganized in this demo, just because I am going to add a bunch of stuff, which is going to break all my grouping order. Let's save this here. Okay, so now I have a metallic read. Okay, let's come back here. The main thing I need is to really, I don't really care about adjusting my normal or my roughness or even my metallic in terms of being able to swap out the colors. What we're looking for are big color changes, right? So for the first one, let's bring in my mask A here. And if we double click on this and we look at it, this is a virtual texture. So it's showing 2 UDIMs at once. That's why it's very long. So I actually have 2. And this one is going to control, looking at this one's a little bit more simple. So I'll just do 2. It doesn't have a blue channel because this guy, again, I was supposed to do the more complicated one, but we'll just stick with this one. We'll just do one less mix. So I have red and green. Okay, now in order to split this up into individual maps, what I need is a breakout. So let's do breakout float 3, right? Which then gives me RGB. I don't have blue, but that's okay. Now I'm just going to plug it in here. And now I can separate my red and my green and blue for my other stuff. Okay. Now the concept is pretty simple. I basically just need a lerp, right? So I'm going to create a linear interpolate. And now my color correction is going to be driven by this red channel mask, right? So basically this red value here, if we look at these individual channels, like red, you can see once we separate, this is how it's going to look. And then this is how my green channel is going to look. And I don't have any blue for this one. But you can see how stacking our mask is much more useful and more manageable. Now for this here, I'm going to place let's place this under B. Let's preview this. Okay. And this looks weird because it has this face in here. So I can't tell what's going on. Let me just replace this human face with not the clothing. There we are. Okay. And for this here, I just want to put a color, or sorry, constant color. Let's do a vector 3. I just want to make sure this is working. Okay. So let's just adjust the color here. Okay, so it's mixing the wrong one. So I need to actually probably flip this order. So let's do this as A. And let's do this as B. Miguel has stepped away for 1 second. Okay. And now if I come over here, as I change this color, it's correcting the right area, right? So I'm looking for that change here. That means my lerp is set up correctly and it's reading the mask correctly. So that's all this green is for, just to double check. So before I move in and do more complicated stuff. Actually, I know what I'm doing. That's kind of stupid. So my green here, this I want to change. I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call this albedo skirt. Okay. And then all my changes here, this will be my skirt change. And this is where I screwed up a lot, was basically just trying to organize. So this first area is now going to only color correct my skirt. And let's just have this skirt tint. Okay. Now, if there is no change, we should actually be reading this, right, into B. And if there's no change, it's going to be A. Okay, so if I come over here and I look at my network and I start changing this, this is correct. So yes, now it's changing the right thing. So ignore what I did earlier. I actually had it piped backwards. Okay, so this one is working. And let's connect this to the main one. Base color. I'm just going to drag this up here just so it's a little bit quicker. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is I want to be able to copy this. I'm going to select everything here. I'm going to copy and paste. I don't need to read the same map again twice. So I'm just going to reconnect this here. And this will be a color correction that will correct the waste. So this will be albedo waste. Okay. And I'm going to rename all this because this is going to be a mess if I don't. So this will be under waste. Basically, it comes down to, I think, my fumbling was just organization.
Well, it's also you feel the pressure of
A live audience.
yeah.
Okay. I'm going to put this in the correct order. So if I don't number this right, they're going to show up everywhere. So my last node here is number 5. Let's do number 6. This is number 7. This is 8. Let's do this 9. Okay. Now I need another lerp for this. So let's do a linear interpolate. This time, this one will read the green mask into my alpha. And this one here will go into A. And my changes that I alter will go into B. So let's actually preview this one. Okay, and let's just double check that this is working. And I don't think my waistband, is it in here? Okay, it's not. Hold up. Let me double check. This is correct. It's going to my green. Let's do this. I probably shouldn't have thrown that away. So I created something not step by step. That's why I do things step by step. Okay, so this is working. So when I plug in this black area, it's making this black, which is how it should be doing that. So I don't know if my chain is breaking along the way. But my lerp is actually working. Let's just put this at desaturation. Okay, so this one's actually working here. Okay, so let's set this back to 0. Let's plug in my multiply. Okay, so that's working. It should be at 1. Let's do my cheap contrast.
Maybe the cheap contrast is really well broken.
Maybe. Oh, it's working. Okay, so that's working. Maybe the multiply doesn't contribute that much. I think that's kind of weird. Let's do this again in here. It's working now. Right? I don't know what I did. I don't know.
It's buggy sometimes. Remember, we're also using the latest version of Unreal that came out like a week ago.
Okay, so I don't. Okay, so it was right. But that type of stuff is really confusing. When you think that you have it right, you do have it right, but it all comes out wrong. But now if I come over here, you can see now I have skirt, contrast, and waist, right? And they're all sitting in order that I like. But now that I have this activated, I can tint my waist. And again, this is why I made it lighter, so I can darken this, right? And I can boost up the saturation. So now I have color for that. I can go over to my waist and I can make it black. Now I don't have control for these little bead sections. So let's load that up. Okay. So what I did.
If you need to make 100 variations now with these controls, it's not that hard.
No, it's much, much easier. Okay, so this is all this first mask. Let's move this up over here. The graph could be cleaned up a little bit, but we'll just deal with it. And I'm going to drop in my second colored mask. So it looks like this. Okay, and you can see I have full RGB values. So this one is similar. What I want to do here, again, is I need a breakout float. So I can pipe this into here. And what I did for these ones is I wanted to keep them simple and easy to color. And when I textured them, the details were so small that diffuse maps were very simple. So this will work out fine. What I did is just created a lerp. And I'm going to create 3 of them. I'm just going to do it ahead of time. Okay. And I'm going to connect this one to here. So it's reading that. And then this should be connected as A. Okay, so this will be taking over. And let's just connect this over here. Okay, so these are all connected. Now, instead of doing anything complicated like color correction, all I want is just to replace the color. So I just create a constant 3 vector. I'm going to convert this to a parameter. And I insert this into B. And this one should be reading my red, which is it's not updating. Okay, so it's working. It's just not.
It's just a little funky.
Maybe it's stuck on previewing. I'm going to stop previewing. Yeah. Okay, so now I have a color swatch there. And this one's similar. We're going to convert this to parameter, or I actually unconverted it. And I'm going to call this I don't really know how to describe the details themselves. They're just breakup. So I just called it mask 1. Let's enter this under albedo. My last one here was 9, so this will be 10. Okay. Let's input this one into here. And then this goes into A. Let's duplicate this. This will be mask 2. And this will be 11. And I'm going to color it something that I can recognize to make sure it's working. And let's input this into B. And then now let's pipe this in here. And that looks like it's working. Okay, so that's good. So I have that yellow coming in there. And then the last one, we'll read the blue channel over here. This will go into A again. And let's duplicate this. This will be mask 3. And this will be order 12. And let's give this a different color, just so I can recognize what it's doing. I think it's better to have better default colors. Like, I don't really want purple as a thing, but I just want to see that's working. And this actually has a gold material, so I think this should actually be yellowish. Okay, and then this one here, we can just change it later. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to select all of this. I'm going to hit C. And I'm going to call this mask colors. And let's just save it again. And let's come over here. And now I can alter this. Some of the threads here are really thin as far as masking. So the metallic map is not really picking up a lot. What I did do for that situation, just to have extra control, was I created a multiply, because that does not look like metallic. So let's just fix that. And let's just create a constant. And let's convert this. And I'll call this metallic multiply. Set this up 1. And give this a proper group under metallic. This would probably be number 2. And put that here. Okay. So now I can bring this up. And it is changing the material to be a little bit more metallic. To me, at least.
Yeah.
Just as a cheat. Now if I come back here, I have individual controls. So you can see I can color and change this. You know, they're all going to stay kind of warm tones, but you do want variety. I have my waist tint, right? So I can change it whichever color I want now. So there's all this nice stuff I can do.
Can you zoom in to the guy on the left, just so they can see that it's not just like a solid color, but you can see all the, yeah.
Yeah, it's not solid. They're all just tinting. I have my skirt tint.
So again, this was created to make a bunch of background extras.
Yeah, and that's the pipeline. But this is, you know, the reality. It's not super exciting, but most of the work you do is not exciting. You make something kind of sort of cool, or at least what you think is cool, and then you spend most of the time just making sure that you have a way of working with it. But yeah, so that's my graph for this one. Right, it's still pretty basic, but that's the setup, and that's how have this working with Substance Painter, so that it would be really easy. Now, if I want to go back, most of it is going to be paint body variation. I think the clothing, this is enough for the distance that they'll be seen at.
Just like that.
Yeah, they'll be far away.
Yeah.
And then it's just a matter now of coming in here and, you know, or going to Substance, spitting out 2 maps, one normal, one mask, and then just replacing them in the instance. and it should be really fast and easy from that point, right? So I can just open this, replace these masks, so these can be read. I don't think I actually expose these, but you can just convert them to parameter, expose them, and each time I'm just going to place them in. So this is the final one, which is much more organized, to me at least, right? And then that's it.
People say it looks good.
I have
Yeah,
not.
I mean it's really technical, but there's plenty of streams on YouTube, not on the Gnomon channel, that are more entertainment than actual information, and that's what we don't want. Yeah, we
Yeah.
want this to be really informative. So.
I think you can find things like, how to tint your character, and most of these here, right? Like that's where I'm getting my stuff from. I'm looking at the documentation. I think it's just a workflow, trying to combine it with an actual texture program and go, how can I do these things together? And Substance Painter is the most widely used texturing program.
Question: how long are we going to be working on this project? We have to be done July 1st, so about 4 more months.
Yeah, and we're gonna start moving real fast.
Yeah, because now all the assets are pretty much done. It's just a matter of doing the shots. That's why the xsens suit came in right when it did, which was perfect timing. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's it. I'll show you a little bit of what we're going to talk about next week. But before I do, does anybody have any questions for Tran? Someone wants to know if you could go over it again. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So if nobody has any questions, remember also, if you're looking at this not live, you could always ask questions on the YouTube page in particular. We always check the comments and we always reply. So if you have any questions, ask there. So next week, we'll be talking a little bit about this shot here. We didn't have time to talk about it today, but just started working on some of the shots of the interior of the cave when she falls inside. So I'll talk about how created the vines in Maya using this really cool tool, and the lighting and the stalactites and all this other stuff, and how I went about lighting this, because there's a lot of things that I had to figure out in order to get this to look right. So we'll talk about that next week. And the motion capture stuff is going to be a continuing theme, because at this point we're going to be trying to get as much shots as possible. And we're also starting music this coming Monday. Yeah, it's a moody cave. Well, that's you can't show an evil hole without falling into it. So it has to be pretty moody. But we're going to start doing some music stuff, and hopefully we'll be able to get our good friend Dan Dombrowski to be on here and talk about music and how we're going to approach that. So that's it. So we went 22 minutes over, but I thought it was a really cool talk, and I hope you guys got something out of it. Like always, thanks to Gnomon for making this possible, to Alex and Lenovo that is sponsoring this. Yeah, that's it. Tran,
Yes.
any last thoughts?
No, thank you for sitting through this.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, guys. So hold on. Let me figure out how to get out of here, because I always press the wrong button. Which one do we press? It's this one. Okay. All right. We'll see you guys. Take care.